give Patric Richardson a big round of applause.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Hi. So I'm going to tell you the tiniest bit first, and then you'll hear the rest, I guess. So I moved to Minnesota. You'll find this out in 1999, and many of you I have found know my partner, who is my far better half, Ross Rayla. He's the music critic for the Pioneer Press. So if he's written something bad about you, that's on him. I'm sorry. So cycle. So when they say cycle and they talk to me, and I was like, oh, the cycles of the washing machine. It seems like logical. So I'm going to sort of tell you my whole story through the cycles of the washing machine. And it starts with the pre-soak. The thing about the pre-soak is before anything happens. It's what leads up to everything happening. So when you do your laundry and you need to pre-soak, you're doing it because the washing machine's not really starting, it's just getting ready. So for me, the pre-soak starts when I was about 2. My dad was a builder, and I was obsessed with laundry. He would build houses, and we would go to appliance stores, and I always wanted to see the washer and dryer. So much so that when I turned 3, my birthday's in November, so I was barely 3, but when I was 3, Santa brought me a toy washing machine. So my love of laundry kind of goes way back. And then, I'll skip some of it, but when I was in middle school, I started doing all the laundry in the house, because something that I will tell you, you'll find out in one of my books, is when you say you're going to the laundry room, nobody follows you. So when I was a preteen, it was a chance to kind of have my young man cave. We had a TV down there, and it was in the basement, and I would just go down there and I would do the laundry and I would watch TV. And it was just sort of my space. And so from there, I decided to go to the University of Kentucky. And I should tell you, I was named best dressed in 8th grade and in high school. So I also love clothes. So it makes sense that when you love clothes, you love laundry, because you want to care for them. And so I decided to go to the University of Kentucky. And I studied apparel and textiles, because there was really, I don't know, I guess they have other degrees. I just don't know what they are. I don't know. And so there we start the wash. The wash cycle is the first big cycle of the washing machine. And everybody thinks that this is the most important cycle. It actually isn't. The thing about the wash cycle, what the wash cycle does is it's the start of the process. The wash cycle is when things really get going. It's, the clothes go in and the soap or the detergent goes in and the cycle starts. And for me, the cycle starts when I go to the University of Kentucky and start studying apparel and textiles. I study apparel and textiles, and I was really, really lucky, because I didn't know it, but the University of Kentucky has one of the best apparel and textiles programs in the country. It was just kind of a fortuitous thing. I sort of went there because my friends were going, and then it just kind of happened. And I was there, and we had this costume collection. The costume collection was owned by a woman named Mona von Bismarck. She was the first American woman to be named Best Dressed Woman in the World in 1933. And it was said in 1933 that her style was so singular, she wouldn't had to have spent $100,000 a year on clothes to be named Best Dressed Woman in the World, implying that in 1933 she was indeed spending $100,000 a year on clothes. She was also the richest woman in the world, which helped. It was this costume collection, and it was extraordinary, and it exposed me to truly the artistry and the creativity of fashion. And I became very inspired about wanting these things to last. And so I learned about conservation, which is going to become a big part of this story. So I learned about conservation, and I learned about apparel and textiles, and I can tell you about oleophilic and hydrophobic, and I can, tell you about acetate and how it's ruined by acetone. I can tell you all of those things, but that's not really the reason that we're here. So that was the first part of the wash. The next part of the wash is I left the University of Kentucky and I moved to Minnesota. I moved to Minnesota because I was going to work for Neiman Marcus. Neiman Marcus is a big part of this story, because through Neiman Marcus, I understood kind of the magic of fashion and the magic of apparel. And while I worked at Neiman Marcus, I used to tell people, oh, you wash your cashmere sweaters. You really shouldn't take them to the dry cleaner. And everybody at Neiman Marcus is like, that sweater's $7,000. And I'm like, yes, and it came from a goat that peed on itself. So, if the goat peed on itself, you probably can wash it. And a fun fact, cashmere farmers do not take the goats inside when it rains. They stand out there in the rain, so cashmere can get wet. So I used to tell people that when I worked at Neiman Marcus, and I saw these beautiful clothes. And then I left there to go to Nordstrom to manage and buy designer apparel. And I saw really incredible clothes at Nordstrom, but I also found out that I've never seen anything I couldn't wash. So the wash cycle. So then there's the spin. The spin is where everything goes upside down. The spin is where you start seeing everything go crazy. If you sit and watch the washing machine, and I'm assuming that you do because I do, that you watch everything and it goes crazy. It just starts spinning and it starts turning and all these things happen. But this is the first spin. This isn't the good one. This is the one where the clothes are still dirty because all the wash does is it infuses the water and the detergent into the fabric, and it sort of agitates the fabric and starts getting it clean. But it's still dirty at this point. So this is the first spin, and my first spin was I decided to leave Nordstrom and open a designer vintage store. I wanted to get a little more creative, and I wanted to get a little more entrepreneurial. And so I decided to open a vintage store, and I named it Mona Williams because that was Mona's name when she was named Best Dressed Woman in the World. So I started a designer vintage store, and I had this little corner, and in this little corner, I sold laundry products. And I didn't sell it. I would love to tell you that I was like, oh, I wanted a greener earth, and that's not the truth. The truth was, people would come in and they'd be like, I'd love to buy that, but I don't want to pay to dry clean it. And I'd be like, au contraire, you don't have to. You don't have to dry clean it. There's no reason to dry clean it. You can wash it, and these are the products that'll do it. And so that's kind of how that got started. A big thing happened, which is where the spin really comes. There was an article about me in the Star Tribune, which is funny since my husband works for the Pioneer Press, but there was an article about me in the Star Tribune about the fact that I wash everything I own. And so I wash all of these things, and so there's this article, and people start coming in, and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to know how to wash this, and I want to know how to wash that. And do you really wash your suit? And do you really wash your cashmere overcoat? And the answer is yes. And so people started asking, and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So there's a thing here. And about that time, something else happened, which this is another big part of the spin. The RealReal, do you know what the RealReal is? If you sell designer apparel, you really know what the RealReal is because it was sort of like a dagger going straight through your heart. Because everybody stopped buying designer fashion because they could buy fake designer, they could buy other designer fashion from the RealReal. And so I had to start pivoting and I had to get creative. And so I started teaching laundry camp. And laundry camp is where the rinse comes. So here's the thing about the rinse. The rinse is the real magic of the laundry process. The rinse comes this is when the clothes actually come clean because the soap and the detergent and the dirt and the coffee stains and the kombucha stains and all those things this is when they rinse out. It's when things kind of make sense again. So I started teaching laundry camp and I taught laundry camp, and one day I had a camp and this woman said, you really should have a TV show. And I said, you're completely right. Because I am funny and I am charming and I would be great on TV. And she said, no, really, I'm a producer. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. Well, you already know that I'm charming and great. And so, when do we start? And it took a really long time. And that same week, and this is what is so weird because my life kind of works like this. That same week, this other woman says to me, you should write a book. And I'm like, you're right, because I'm funny and I'm charming and, I kind of had the shtick down. And she said, no, really, I'll help you. And her name was Karen. And if you've read Laundry Love, you know that it's Patric Richardson and Karen B. Miller. So we started writing a book. And it was really funny because I didn't know how to write a book. I know how to wash a cashmere overcoat, but I don't know how to write a book. She knew how to write a book, but she didn't know how to wash a cashmere overcoat. So it kind of worked. And so we wrote this book and we sent it in, and it was really it was like a Hallmark movie experience. I don't really know how else to say it, because you hear these stories of people who are like, oh my God, I worked 42 years to write a book, and we wrote a book and publishers were like fighting over it. So it was kind of an amazing thing. And so I wrote a book, and then it was supposed to come out in 2020. And I don't know if you remember, 2020 had this thing. It was not the best year. And so they pushed it back to March 30, 2021. And I was like, oh shoot, another year, and I'm waiting. And by this point, I have a store in the Mall of America, and like I'm selling laundry product and I'm selling designer vintage. I'm selling everything because, you're trying to kind of get through. And then HGTV's like, we're ready to pick up your show. And I'm like, oh, well, it's about time. And they're like, it's going to premiere on March 31st, 2021. So I had a book on March 30th and a TV show on March 31st. And so, yeah, it was that was a good week. It was a really good week. So those two things happened. And from there, the wash gets really good because, this is when the magic really starts. I found out that somebody else loves laundry. Her name's Kelly Ripa. And yeah, I know. And so they call me and they're like, would you be on Kelly and Ryan? And I'm like, I can have a bag packed in 15 minutes. When would you like me there? And they said, it's going to be a couple weeks. And I go on, and it went really well. And I gave her a book. And this may actually be what's on my headstone. It'll either be that I loved Ross unconditionally or this. I'm not sure yet. There's still time. But I gave her a book, and that was on a Wednesday. And the following Monday, I get a call from my publisher, and the exact quote, because I'll never forget it, is, what the fuck is going on? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. And they're like, what is happening? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you mean? Have you not seen? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm trying to sell soap. Tell me what's happening. Your book is the #1 item on Amazon. Not the #1 book, but the #1 item. Very few people in their life get the #1 item on Amazon. And it was because she'd read the book over the weekend, and she comes back on Monday, and in her monologue, she's sitting there with Ryan, and she's like, I read this book. Everything he says is true. And so people come out of the woodwork. And so it was really pretty incredible. And I got to go back. I go back, and it was with Mark the second time. And I'm starting to walk on stage, and she's like, this is my next husband. And I said, without thinking, I'm looking at your first one, and this is a mistake. Anyway, so Kelly Ripa, she was really good to me. And so it led me to thinking. And the book really led me to thinking. It got me very interested in sustainability. I always was, because I grew up in Eastern Kentucky. I grew up in a beautiful part of the world, and I watched what strip mining did to parts of the state. And so I was very interested in the environment, but I became even more so. And I sort of learned through the process, I can get better, right? We can always get better, and I can get better. And so I decided we should write a second book, because I realized all this stuff I'm doing, you built this kit for your laundry room because you have vinegar and water, and you have vodka, and you have a spray bottle and a spray brush, and you have soap, and you have all of these things. And I'm using all of these same things through the rest of my house. And so I said, we should write House Love. And House Love is how to clean your house like your laundry. And so we start House Love, and thank you, Kelly Ripa. And so we start the second book, and we get my creativity really has to sort of grow, because I have to expand what I'm thinking, because by this point I'm teaching laundry camp and I'm traveling around, I'm doing all these things, but I have to kind of grow, because I don't know how long the laundry stick is going to go. strangely enough, I think he's going to go forever because it's one of those things that, I mean, the Buddha, and I don't actually think this quote is true, but it's such a great quote. The Buddha said, after enlightenment, there's laundry. And so, it's something everybody does. But so we started doing House Love. And so we wrote House Love, and it came out. It's funny, the weirdest thing that happened is House Love came out and somebody called me the Ina Garten of laundry, but it went with House Love. I don't know, it was still pretty great because you can compare me to Ina Garten anytime you want. We both wear untucked shirts and have messy hair. And so we wrote House Love, and I sort of got to thinking about growth, and those sorts of things. And so this is where the Rents really sort of happened. The Rents was when everything kind of came together for me. So I have a store in the Mall of America and a really, really wonderful business. And, I've now written 2 books. Lots of people can't say they've written 2 books. And even lots of people can actually say they've written 2 books. Not a lot of people can say they've published 2 books. And a TV show and, all of those sorts of things. And so that was the next cycle. So then there's the final spin. And the final spin is kind of where I'm at right now. Everything's getting crazy again, right? And you don't really know what's going to happen. I don't really know what's coming next. I know I'm launching a podcast because I don't have enough else to do. And I decided with the podcast, I didn't want to tie myself to laundry and I didn't want to tie myself to home. So I decided to name it, or actually, I shouldn't say I decided. Someone had the idea and I decided that it was a really good idea. So I can't take credit for the name, but we decided to call it Domestic Rebel because it's typically women, it's the women's environment, and I'm a guy in it, so that's sort of rebellious. And then the fact that I hate a lot of chemical companies. I think that I like Procter & Gamble as much as they like me. I think that's really kind of how that works. So that's sort of my next big spin. I don't know what's coming, I know that things are getting ready to get up. We're getting ready to see upheaval, and we're going to kind of embrace it. And so that's kind of where I'm at. That's sort of the story. I know you have laundry questions, and I'm really happy to answer them. But I wanted to open it up because I figured that you have some questions. And I'm happy to answer. I'm happy to answer laundry questions. I'm also happy to answer everything else. I mean, I can even tell you about Mounjaro. Whatever you want to know, I'm kind of an open book. So that's sort of the story, and those are sort of the cycles of laundry and cycles of life.